At my baby's baptism, my mother-in-law shoved me aside, grabbed the microphone, and announced, "We've decided to raise the baby without you." My husband nodded and said, "It's for the best." I laughed, walked up to the priest, and handed him a letter. When he read it out loud, my in-laws' smug smiles turned to pure terror. I never imagined that the happiest day of our lives would turn into a nightmare. My name is Sarah, and this is the story of how I reclaimed my life and my son from those who sought to take them away. From the moment I met David, I was enchanted by his charm and kindness. We married in a quaint chapel in Charleston, South Carolina, surrounded by friends and family. His parents, Richard and Margaret, were pillars of their community, known for their generosity and strong opinions. Margaret, in particular, had a commanding presence that could fill any room. When I became pregnant with our first child, I hoped it would bring us all closer. Margaret had always been vocal about her beliefs, and I anticipated some unsolicited advice. However, I never expected the extent to which she would go to impose her will. Throughout my pregnancy, Margaret insisted on being involved in every decision. She accompanied me to doctor's appointments uninvited, redecorated our nursery without consent, and even attempted to dictate our baby's name. David often dismissed my concerns, attributing her behavior to excitement. I tried to be understanding, but her overbearing nature was suffocating. The day of our son Jacob's baptism arrived, and the historic church in downtown Charleston was filled with loved ones. As the ceremony commenced, I felt a surge of emotion, grateful for this moment. But just as the priest prepared to proceed, Margaret stood abruptly, her heels clicking against the stone floor, and approached the pulpit. She took the microphone and, with a triumphant smile, announced, "We've decided to raise the baby without you." Her words echoed through the sanctuary, leaving a stunned silence in their wake. I turned to David, seeking reassurance, but he avoided my gaze and murmured, "It's for the best." A cold realization washed over me. This was premeditated. They intended to take my child from me, but they underestimated me. I had anticipated Margaret's interference and had taken measures to protect myself and Jacob. Suppressing my trembling, I approached the priest and handed him a sealed envelope. He opened it, his eyes scanning the contents before reading aloud. "This document is a restraining order against Margaret and Richard Thompson, prohibiting them from any contact with Jacob or myself. Any violation will result in immediate legal action." Gasps filled the church as all eyes turned to the Thompsons. Margaret's smug expression morphed into one of shock and fear. Richard's face paled, and David looked as if the ground had been pulled from beneath him. Margaret's voice trembled with indignation. "How dare you?" I met her gaze, my voice steady. "How dare I? How dare you conspire to take my child? This ends now." The priest cleared his throat, attempting to regain control. "Perhaps we should proceed with the ceremony." Margaret's eyes blazed with fury, but she knew better than to defy a court order publicly. She turned on her heel and exited the church, Richard trailing behind her. David remained, his face a portrait of conflict. After the baptism, David approached me. "Sarah, I didn't want this." "Didn't you?" I challenged. "You stood by and let them plan this. You betrayed me." He reached for my hand, but I pulled away. I was weak. "I see that now. Please, let's fix this." I studied him, searching for sincerity. "It won't be easy. Trust needs to be rebuilt." "I'll do whatever it takes," he vowed. In the following weeks, David cut ties with his parents, recognizing the toxicity they brought into our lives. We attended counseling, working through the betrayal and pain. It was a long road, but we emerged stronger, united in our commitment to each other and to Jacob. Margaret and Richard attempted to challenge the restraining order, but found no sympathy in the courts. Their reputations suffered, and they eventually moved away, leaving us to heal and grow as a family. Reflecting on that tumultuous time, I realized the importance of standing firm against those who seek to control and manipulate. I found my voice, my strength, and reclaimed my life. After the baptism disaster, you'd think they'd back off. But no, Margaret wasn't done. About a week later, I started noticing things. Weird things. First, my car tires were slashed in our driveway. Then, someone broke into our mailbox. I reported everything, but the cops didn't take it seriously. Probably some neighborhood kids, they said. But I knew better. David said I was being paranoid. That made me angry. I was the one who had to look over my shoulder constantly. He didn't understand how terrifying it felt to leave the house with Jacob and not know who was watching us. Then came the CPS visit. It was a Wednesday morning. I was still in my pajamas, feeding Jacob, when there was a knock on the door. Two people stood there, a man and a woman, with official badges. We received an anonymous tip, the woman said, about possible neglect and unsafe conditions for a minor. My heart dropped. I let them in because I had nothing to hide. But it was humiliating. They inspected everything, opened closets, checked Jacob's body for bruises, took pictures of his room. I was crying by the end of it. They left, and I immediately called David at work. He went silent. Then he said, "Don't panic, but I think my mom might be behind it." I almost screamed. "You think?" Of course it was her. She's trying to take my baby. Again. David came home early that day. We sat at the kitchen table in silence. Finally, he said, "I'll talk to her." "No," I said. "You're going to sit this one out. I'm going to handle it. My way." I hired a private investigator the next day. His name was Roy. Former military. Knew his stuff. Quiet guy, but thorough. I told him everything. He started digging. Within 2 weeks, Roy came back with photos and recordings. Margaret had been meeting with a woman named Lisa, an old family friend who just so happened to work at the county office. She was feeding Margaret internal info about CPS cases and helped her file the complaint under a fake name. Roy even got a recording of Margaret saying, "We'll get Jacob eventually. One way or another." I took it all straight to my lawyer. We filed a lawsuit. Harassment. Attempted custodial interference. Abuse of power. Everything. And that's when the real hell started. Margaret and Richard countersued for grandparent rights. Said we were emotionally damaging Jacob by keeping him from his loving grandparents. The local news picked up the story. Reporters started showing up outside our house. Neighbors stopped waving when I walked by. Some even took Margaret's side, said she was just a worried grandma. David was cracking. I could see it. One night, he said, "Maybe we should settle. Give them visitation. Just a little." I lost it. You still don't get it. They don't want visitation, David. They want to erase me. I took Jacob and stayed at my sister's place for a few days. I needed space. Time to think. Then something unexpected happened. One morning, while I was at the park with Jacob, a woman approached me. She looked nervous. "Are you Sarah?" she asked. I nodded. She introduced herself as Erin. She said she used to be Margaret's assistant, helped with church work and charity events. She had heard about the lawsuit and wanted to help. "She's done this before," Erin said quietly. "Years ago. To another young woman. That woman had been dating Richard's nephew. Got pregnant. Margaret didn't like her, thought she wasn't worthy. She spread lies, called CPS, made her life hell until she gave up custody. She'll keep pushing," Erin warned. "Unless someone stops her." I took Erin's testimony and added it to the case. The next court date was brutal. Margaret sat there smug as ever. Her lawyer tried to paint me as unstable, emotional, unreliable. I kept my head down. Let the evidence speak. When my lawyer played the audio of Margaret threatening to take Jacob, the courtroom went dead silent. The judge's face tightened. He paused, took a long look at Margaret, then looked at me. And just as he was about to speak, David stood up. "Your Honor," he said, voice shaking. "I have something to say." Everyone turned to look. My heart started pounding. David stood up in court, his face pale, voice trembling. "Your Honor, I lied." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. I knew about my mother's plan. Not all of it, but enough. I didn't stop it because I didn't think she'd go this far. I thought it was just talk. I froze. He looked at me. "Sarah, I didn't know about the CPS call. I didn't know she had someone on the inside. but I knew she was planning to fight for Jacob. And I let it happen. The judge narrowed his eyes. Mr. Powell, are you saying you were complicit in your mother's interference with custody? David swallowed. Yes, sir. And I'm ready to testify to everything I know. That moment changed everything. David wasn't innocent, but he was finally telling the truth. I didn't know if I could forgive him yet, but part of me was relieved he was finally standing up to them. Margaret's lawyer tried to pivot. Called David confused. Tried to suggest he was manipulated by me. But the damage was done. The judge ordered a temporary no-contact order for the Thompsons until further review. But then, something else surfaced. Roy, the private investigator, called me late one night. He sounded rattled. I found something else. Something bad. What? I asked, heart in my throat. There's a trust fund. Set up in Jacob's name. But the money doesn't come from you or David. It comes from Richard's company. That didn't sound unusual at first. They were rich, after all. No, Roy continued. It's a shell. The company isn't real. It's a front for another fund. And that fund is in both Richard and David's name. Now I was truly confused. What does that mean? It means this was more than just a power play from your mother-in-law. This was about money. A lot of it. And David was in on it. I couldn't sleep that night. The next day, I confronted David in our kitchen. What's the deal with the trust fund? His face went white. How do you know about that? I have someone who knows how to look. Tell me the truth, David. He sat down, buried his face in his hands. My dad offered me a deal. If I could get custody, or at least partial custody with them involved, I'd get access to the fund. It was supposed to be for Jacob's future, his education, his inheritance. But, yeah, there was more to it. I was stupid. So you were going to sell our son for money? He didn't say anything. That silence told me everything. I left again. This time for real. I got a lawyer to draw up separation papers and filed for full custody. But I didn't stop there. I contacted the IRS. I handed over everything Roy found. If they were using shell companies to hide assets or manipulate custody for financial gain, the government needed to know. And just when I thought it couldn't get worse, I started getting strange messages on my phone. You're making a mistake. You'll regret this. Then one night, my phone buzzed with a photo. It was of Jacob, taken through our living room window. From outside. I called the police immediately. They put a patrol on our street, but couldn't trace the number. I installed cameras everywhere. My world was spinning. I was scared, exhausted, but I knew I couldn't stop. They were trying to wear me down, make me give up. But I wouldn't. Not after everything. Not after what I knew now. I called Roy again. Dig deeper, I said. I don't care what it costs. Because something told me this went deeper than even I knew. And I was right. Roy didn't disappoint. He dug deep. Dug through court records, old property filings, business registrations, all of it. And what he found? Margaret and Richard weren't just using a fake company for the trust fund. They were laundering money. Through churches. Through charities. Through real estate donations that never actually went anywhere. That trust fund in Jacob's name? It wasn't meant for Jacob. It was a cover. Something to throw off investigators. To make their transactions look family-oriented and clean. They'd done this before with other relatives. A niece. A grandchild who passed away in infancy. Always money. Always hidden behind a sob story. And David? He knew. Maybe not every piece. But he knew enough. He signed documents. Benefited from it. Took money. Used it to pay off his college loans. Used it to cover some of our wedding expenses. I felt sick. My whole life with him was a lie wrapped in ribbons. I gave Roy's full report to the authorities. IRS, FBI, local police. They opened an investigation immediately. Subpoenas were issued. Offices raided. Accounts frozen. But just when I thought it couldn't get any more chaotic, David tried to take Jacob. I got home one night, arms full of groceries, and the house was quiet. Too quiet. I checked his room, empty. Toys scattered. Diaper bag gone. I called David. He didn't answer. I called his sister. Nothing. Called the police. Reported it as a possible parental abduction. They found him 4 hours later at the airport in Charlotte, holding Jacob in a corner of the departure gate, ticket to Mexico in his hand. He said he panicked. Said he thought I'd win full custody and he'd never see his son again. He was arrested on the spot. I showed up at the police station, and when they brought David out in cuffs, he looked at me and said, "They told me to do it. My parents. They said it was the only way." And just like that, his last shred of defense was gone. Court came fast. The charges stacked up: fraud, financial crimes, attempted custodial interference, conspiracy. Margaret and Richard both denied everything at first, of course. But the evidence Roy found was airtight. The FBI even found offshore accounts, hidden properties, fake board members. David flipped. Turned witness against his parents in exchange for a reduced sentence. That part stung. He got 18 months in a low-security facility. Margaret and Richard? 9 years each. I got full custody of Jacob, and the court issued a permanent restraining order against all 3 of them. But that wasn't the end of it. The internet found out. News outlets ran stories. Charleston family dynasty caught in money laundering scandal. Pictures of Margaret in court. Interviews with people from our neighborhood. Some defended her. Most didn't. Her church disowned her. Their charity was shut down. I'd be lying if I said I didn't enjoy watching it all burn. But I wasn't perfect either. I let things slide. I ignored red flags. I let love blind me. I married into a nightmare family and tried too hard to pretend everything was okay. I paid the price for that. But now? Now it's just me and Jacob. We moved to Asheville, started fresh. I got a job at a nonprofit. Simple work, good people. Jacob's growing fast. Smart. Happy. Safe. Sometimes I still look over my shoulder. Sometimes I still check the windows twice. Trauma lingers like smoke. But we're okay. And Margaret? Last I heard, she was trying to appeal her sentence. Claimed she did it all for love. Let her rot. Because love doesn't look like control. Love doesn't look like manipulation. And love sure as hell doesn't try to steal a child away from his mother.